This is the Strong is a Mindset podcast, episode number 122. If you think sleep doesn't matter, think again. This is the Strong is a Mindset podcast, where you'll learn how to build both a strong body and a strong mind by eating, moving, and thinking. I'm your host, physician, personal trainer, certified health coach, and certified life coach, Carrie Holland. Hey, how are you? What's new? What's good? So, what's good here? We are going to talk about sleep today. So I realize that it's 122 episodes in, and I'm only just now talking about sleep, and I need to rectify that. But in order to do this, I have to admit something to you. So for a long time, I didn't think that sleep mattered. I thought it was a soft subject. I thought it wasn't important enough to talk about. So let me explain where this comes from, because I'm guessing that many of you listening can relate. I had a career where nearly every one of my colleagues had to function on little to no sleep. I had a career where my older predecessors would spend 3 nights a row in the hospital without a shower, let alone sleep, and this was before work hour restrictions were put into place. Some of my colleagues were opening people up and performing surgery on patients with very little sleep. In my own residency, one of the shifts that we did was to come in at noon, take call all night, and then go to clinic afterwards from 1 to 5 in the afternoon the next day. And those were not the best stretches. Most of us were zombies by the end. And it makes me cringe to say that. But what makes me cringe even more is that many of these same people who had to get by on next to zero sleep were the same ones who were proud of it. So I can remember in medical school and then in residency, it was almost like a competition to see who got the least amount of sleep. It was like a badge of honor, and to complain about it was absolutely unheard of. The physicians who went before us, our older mentors, had it even worse than we did because of the lack of work hour restrictions, and many of them were not afraid to tell us just how easy we had it. In one of my last physician jobs, before I even transitioned away from clinical medicine, I had a coworker, a physician colleague, who always came to work with a 2-liter bottle of Mountain Dew. He barely slept. So when he came in for his 12-hour shifts, which often stretched to 13 or 14-hour shifts, depending on the day, he would work through that 2-liter bottle, and it would often be empty by the end. I always knew when he was working because I would see the empty 2-liter bottle under the physician work desk. And while downing Mountain Dew might have worked for him, there was no way I could do what he did. I would have fallen over. But he was praised for it. His coworkers praised him for being a machine. And these are just a few examples. I will spare you the others. And my point for bringing all these examples to light is to acknowledge that you might be in a work culture where sleep is just not given the respect it deserves, where you're seen as not measuring up if you can't function on 3 hours of sleep and green soda. So this isn't a rant on the medical system or the culture of medicine, even though it may sound like it just a little bit, but rather it's an example of the way that sleep is viewed within one particular community. So having grown up in that, you can imagine that I, along with many of my physician colleagues, learned very quickly to shut our mouths when it came to lack of sleep. And in some cases, we were congratulated for it. It was almost like a test of how little sleep can you get by on and still function. So you can see how messed up this is. Sleeplessness, or running on empty, truly was, and in some cases still is, seen as a badge of honor, which is just insane to me. And that's just medicine. I'm sharing with you what I know from my experience in medicine because that's the career I had and the community I was a part of. But I imagine my experience is not unique, and that sleeplessness as a badge of honor is prevalent in other high-stress, high-performing, high-achieving industries too. And because of this, I had some unlearning to do. And admittedly, I had some pretty serious resistance to letting go of the belief that I could just sleep when I die because that's the stance I had been taking since 2002. I had recognized that priding myself on getting hardly any sleep and still being able to function, even though it wasn't really functioning, was frankly just dumb. And the more I learned about the impact of sleep, the more I realized that it was worth it to make some changes to ensure that I got a decent amount of it. And what I've learned through the work I do now that I'm not applauded for being up all night and still standing, is that if you're trying to lose weight or if you're trying to build muscle, sleep matters. It matters a lot. And here is a key takeaway that I want to spell out from the get-go. Even just a few minutes in, I want to make this loud and clear. You could be doing everything right. You could be eating whole foods. You could be drinking water, cutting back on restaurant and takeout meals. You can be going to the weight room and throwing around all kinds of heavy iron. But if you're not getting enough sleep, you may not lose weight. You may not build muscle as fast as you'd like. In fact, you might lose muscle if you're not getting enough sleep. And I'll explain why that is in just a little bit. And the take home here is that if you are skimping on sleep, you're not going to lose weight the way you want. You're not going to build muscle as quickly, and you're not going to maintain the muscle you have as well as if you got a decent amount of sleep. So we need to fix that, okay? We need to find a way for you to sleep. So here's where we're going today. We're going to talk about the relationship between sleep and weight and body composition, okay? Because there are some pretty cool metabolic and hormonal things going on that I want you to understand about how sleep impacts you so that you can see all the ways that lack of sleep might be getting in the way of your physique goals. And that is true whether you're looking to lose weight, build muscle, or both. And then we're going to talk about how to get more sleep, because it's one thing for me to tell you, hey, you need more sleep, but it's another thing to actually do it. So I want to try to keep this real, practical, and actionable. And I also want to make sure to address what to do if you're a shift worker or if you have times when you're up all night so you know what to do to optimize your sleep. All right, so let's go. So first, let's talk about how not getting enough sleep will impact you from a weight and physique perspective, okay? I want to spell out for you a number of the physiologic and metabolic factors at play here to make it really clear how lack of sleep manifests from a biologic perspective. So first, let's talk about your hunger hormones. We're going to talk about the two that you may hear or read about most often, and those are leptin and ghrelin. So leptin is a hormone produced by your fat cells. Leptin communicates with your brain about your body's energy stores, and that, in turn, regulates your food intake. When your body has less fat, like when you're in a fat loss phase, leptin decreases, which is a message that your brain interprets as, hey, your body is starving. And your brain reacts to that message by increasing hunger and decreasing your energy expenditure. So this is just one of the many reasons that weight loss can get tricky, because leptin will start working against you and sound the alarm that says, I'm hungry, feed me. And it's also just another reason to avoid drastic weight loss, because your body will fight you tooth and nail to hang on to that weight. And on the flip side, when your body carries more fat, your leptin levels increase, which in turn suppresses your appetite. So your leptin levels will be proportional to the amount of fat that you carry on your body, meaning the less body fat you have, the less leptin you have circulating. And the more body fat you have, the more leptin you have. Leptin tells your brain when you have enough energy stored in your body, and your brain interprets that message as, I'm full. So you can think of leptin as your fullness or your satiety hormone. So I'm just going to mention here, since I'm talking about leptin, there is a condition called leptin resistance, which science is learning more and more about. So leptin resistance is a condition where your brain does not respond to leptin the way it should. And that is a problem, because if your brain is not responding properly to a hormone that's telling you you're full, then that is a setup for higher food intake and subsequent weight gain. So that is a separate podcast in itself, but I wanted to mention it here while we're talking about leptin, because it's something we're going to keep hearing about. Okay, so let's also talk about ghrelin, which is a hunger hormone made largely in your stomach and gets released when your stomach is empty or nearly empty. So ghrelin stimulates your appetite by talking to the hypothalamus, which is a structure in your brain, and it tells your brain, hey, I'm hungry. Ghrelin also communicates with your gut to move food from your stomach to your intestines. It has a role in insulin release. It has a role in promoting fat storage. And so while it has a number of functions, you can keep it simple. For our purposes today, you can think of ghrelin as your hunger hormone and leptin as your fullness hormone. Ghrelin tells your body, I'm hungry, and leptin tells your body, I'm full. So why does this matter, and what is the connection with sleep? So for starters, there are loads of scientific studies that have shown that people who do not get enough sleep, where adequate sleep is considered 7 to 9 hours, those people report an increased appetite and a higher caloric intake. And that is at least in part due to the effects of sleep deprivation on your leptin and ghrelin levels. So what we know now is that when you're sleep deprived, your body makes more ghrelin and less leptin. So that means your body is pumping out more of the hormone that tells you you're hungry and less of the hormone that tells you you're full. And that right there is a setup for weight gain. And that right there should be a reason to get more sleep, okay? This is straight biology right here, and it's really hard to fight biology. Okay. And what's interesting about this is that when this happens and your hormones are shifted, you will likely find yourself with increased food cravings, which has also been supported by the literature. And those food cravings are typically for high calorie, high fat foods, and even chocolate. So I do not know many people who crave broccoli or tomatoes when they're tired. Okay. Most of the people I work with crave carby, fatty foods like pastries or chips or cookies. And when you're running on empty, that is when the 2-day-old donut sitting in the break room starts to look appetizing. No good. And that is your hunger hormones talking. They're telling you you are hungry. All right, next. So while we're talking about hormones, let's keep going and talk about cortisol. But I want to laser in and focus on the connection between sleep, cortisol, and your weight because this is important. And like leptin resistance, we could do an entire podcast on cortisol, but we're going to keep the focus on sleep. So cortisol is considered a stress hormone because your adrenal glands release it in response to stress. Cortisol regulates your body's fight or flight response along with adrenaline to keep you on high alert when you're stressed. So while cortisol is known primarily as a stress hormone, it actually has loads of other non-stress related functions too, like controlling your metabolism, suppressing inflammation, regulating your blood sugar, your blood pressure, and your sleep-wake cycles. So here's what you need to know. When you have too little sleep, your body is likely to produce more cortisol. There has been plenty of research that documents people who are sleep deprived have higher cortisol levels, especially later in the day when those levels should be decreasing to get you ready for bedtime. So when you've got elevated cortisol running through your body, that cortisol tells your body to store fat. So in times of stress, your body wants to hang on to fat for energy. So go back to the fight or flight response. Your body wants to be prepared, so cortisol kicks up and will cause your body to hold on to extra fat because it thinks it needs that extra fat to either fight or flee. So I think of it as your body hoarding energy because it doesn't know what's coming. So your body is responding by causing you to hold on to fat. Okay, so that is the impact of increased cortisol when you have chronic poor sleep. You hold on to fat in case you need it for later. But there's even more to it than that. So when you have elevated cortisol and your body goes into a stress response and hangs on to fat, your body still needs a source of energy. So what happens? Your body turns to other sources for energy, like muscle. Your body starts breaking down muscle as a source of energy instead of fat. So this here is a double whammy, especially if you are lifting weights and trying to build muscle. If you're not getting enough sleep, cortisol will not only cause you to hang on to fat, but it will also cause you to lose muscle while your body uses that muscle as a source of energy. No good. Okay, next. Another way that sleep deprivation is messing with you is through your decision making. And I know this may be fairly obvious, but I want to point it out. When you are tired, you are not thinking at your best. Okay? Remember, when emotion is high, cognition is low. And when you are sleep deprived, there is increased emotionality, and there are a number of things happening to your brain that make it hard for you to make choices you're proud of. So first, your prefrontal cortex, or the evolved part of your brain, the part of your brain that we talk about all the time here because it helps you make decisions in advance and helps you think about the long term rather than getting caught up in the short term immediate gratification of a cookie. Well, that part of your brain becomes less active when you've had poor sleep. So without your prefrontal brain working for you, you may be left with poor judgment, increased impulsiveness, decreased rational decision-making, and that's when you may find yourself eating half of a cold pizza from your fridge when you weren't even hungry in the first place. So there's also research that suggests that the reward centers of your brain are more highly stimulated by food when you haven't had enough sleep. So that means the chips and salsa are even more appealing than usual. And because your prefrontal brain is ghosting you, you may have a harder time knowing when to say when. So controlling yourself around those chips becomes a challenge. And that's when impulsive food choices can be a problem. So when you're tired, you have reduced cognitive control, which is just as it sounds. I think of it as your primitive caveman brain coming out in full force, and you've got limited control over it. And when you have reduced cognitive control, it becomes that much harder to manage and respond to food cravings, especially for calorically dense foods that have loads of fat and ultra-processed carbs. It gets really challenging to say no. And then last, I found this fascinating, but there is research that suggests that when you are sleep deprived, your sense of smell might be heightened, which is thought to also impact your desire for certain foods and ultimately lead you to eat them when you're not hungry. And this was shown to be true for calorically dense foods like cookies and bread compared to chicken breast, okay? So you have a combination of factors. You've got worse decision-making. You've got increased impulsivity. You have increased emotionality, increased reward sensitivity, decreased self-control, and increased smell sensitivity. So those are just a few of the ways that your brain will mess with you when you are sleep deprived. And all of those can contribute to overeating. Okay? So another way that sleep deprivation will mess with your weight is by directly impacting your metabolism. And this goes back to insulin. When you are chronically sleep deprived, your body's cells can become resistant to insulin. And all that means is that your body is making insulin, but your cells aren't using it to take up blood sugar to use for energy. And when that happens, your body resorts to storing that excess blood sugar as fat. And with time, this will lead you down a path to insulin resistance and weight gain and potentially diabetes. All right, so what I just described was a direct impact of sleep deprivation on your metabolism, but lack of sleep also has an indirect impact on your metabolism. So think about it. When you are tired, or if you have been up all night working, how excited are you to go for a run afterward? How thrilled are you about killing it in the weight room? Not very thrilled, I imagine, and it makes sense. Most people do not feel super motivated or even energized to exercise when they are sleep deprived. And forget exercise for just a second. Most people, when they are sleep deprived, do not feel super pumped to do much physical activity, period. I don't know about you, but when I haven't slept, I just want to sit on the couch. And research has shown this repeatedly. Lack of sleep correlates with decreased physical activity. Sure, you exercise less, but you also move less overall. And it makes sense because you've got nothing in the tank to propel you. And that decrease in both your exercise activity and your non-exercise activity is going to result in a decrease to your total daily energy expenditure or your total calories burned. And over time, that can lead you to gain weight. Okay, so now let's switch gears here for just a minute because I also want to make sure to cover how sleep and muscle are connected. So many of you may be looking to do more than lose weight. Maybe that is not your focus, and maybe you're more interested in building muscle. Well, sleep is important here too. And if you're not getting enough of it, you may be running in circles and you may find that your strength training is not giving you the biggest return on investment that it could be. So we've talked about it already, but when you're sleep deprived, your cortisol goes up. When that happens, your body holds onto fat because it doesn't want to lose any in case you have to go into fight or flight mode. And then because of this, your body will turn to muscle and it will start breaking down your muscle as a source of energy in place of fat. But at the same time, when you don't get enough sleep, your body also slows down the rate at which you build muscle. And that is related to increased cortisol and decreased testosterone and growth hormone. So in plain English, lack of sleep is basically messing with your hormones to make it a hostile environment for building muscle. Meaning, when you are sleep deprived, you are not only breaking down more muscle, but you're also not building as much muscle as when you are well rested. So this is another double whammy here. And the end result of this is that not only do you have decreased muscle, but you also have decreased muscle strength. So when you strength train, remember what you're doing. You're creating micro tears in your muscles that your body then goes and repairs, especially while you are sleeping, in order for those muscles to come back bigger and stronger for your next workout. So if you're not getting enough sleep, then you're essentially decreasing your body's opportunity to strengthen itself after you put in the work lifting the weights. So you may still be going to the gym, but you may see that your progress is slow or even stalled. You may be stuck at the same weight in the gym for months. And it's in part because your body hasn't gotten the sleep it needs to properly repair and build the muscles that you're working so hard for. And let's also not forget the increased risk of hurting yourself. So please hear me. When you haven't slept, that is not the time to go and do a fancy, complicated exercise routine, okay? Remember, your brain is not operating at its highest level. You are not functioning at your highest level. So getting under a barbell and plates without the safety bars in place, or trying to deadlift when you're already shaky with deadlifts to begin with, that is probably not a good idea, okay? That's a really great way to injure yourself. So please be very cautious about working out when you are tired. Pick something that requires very low coordination and save the complicated moves for when you are better rested, okay? All right. So we have just gone over the many different mechanisms that sleep deprivation is messing with your weight, strength, and overall fitness goals. And my hope is that you can see that the need for sleep is real. This is not sleep when you die, okay? This is not that sleep is for weaklings. No, sleep makes you stronger. Sleep will help you get leaner. Sleep is absolutely essential to optimizing your body composition, whether you want to lose weight, build muscle, or both. And so now the question is, what do you do to improve it? How do you get better sleep? Well, the good news is there are loads of things you can do to improve your sleep. And I would simply encourage you to pick one or two of these things and try them. See what you can put into practice at home in order to get better sleep. Okay? So here's how to do this. So first, be consistent. You know that consistency is key for pretty much every habit you want to establish, and sleep is no exception. So go to bed and wake up at the same time every day, even on the weekends. Your body will grow accustomed to it. Similar to how your stomach growls around the same time every day to tell you it's time for lunch, your body will acclimate to your bedtime and your wake up time, and this will make it easier for you to fall asleep if you're doing it at the same time every day. And have a routine. Remember what we know about your brain. Your brain loves habit, it craves habit, and it thrives on predictability. So having some sort of nighttime ritual, like a shower or a book you read or your skincare routine or whatever it is, start making it a routine, and your brain will take that as a signal of, here we go, it's time for bed. Okay, next, set up your environment to maximize your sleep. So keep your bedroom dark, make it quiet. Get a white noise machine if you need. We have one for every bedroom in our house, and I travel with one. I will not leave home without it. They are really super helpful. And keep your room at a comfortable temperature. Most of the sleep authorities suggest a range of 60 to 67 degrees Fahrenheit or 15.6 to 19.4 degrees Celsius. There will certainly be wide variability around this, but this is what comes up most commonly in the literature. And this temperature range is what falls in line with our body's own circadian rhythms. Our body temperature decreases at night, and if your room is too warm, it may negatively impact your REM sleep, which is considered the mentally restorative stage of sleep. So you may need to make your room a little cooler to promote good sleep. Okay, next, turn off your electronics, ideally 2 hours before bed. So the blue light from your device can make it harder for you to fall asleep, so you want to cut that off early. So some devices like your phone, they have what's called night shift mode, which reduces the amount of blue light that it emits, and it shifts to warmer tones. And that's a start, but ideally you would be done with your phone a few hours before bedtime. So if you're like me, you can pull out a book and try to read. It takes me about 2 minutes to fall asleep when I'm reading a book at night. It is ridiculous. But obviously, if reading wakes you up, then don't do that. But the point here is try to limit your electronics use, okay? Next, manage your eating and caffeine intake to optimize your sleep potential. So it is generally not recommended that you have a huge meal shortly before bedtime. And most medical authorities recommend that you stop eating about 2 to 3 hours before bed to allow adequate time to digest. And if you're someone who struggles with acid reflux, this will also help keep your reflux symptoms minimized. So if that is not practical and you are going to eat something before bedtime, find something that combines protein and whole carbs. So that's something like a Greek yogurt and fruit. Okay. Similarly, you want to limit alcohol and caffeine intake before bed too. So some of you may notice that alcohol helps put you to sleep because it's sedating, but that sleep is typically not restful sleep. You may notice that drinking alcohol too close to bedtime interferes with you staying asleep, and you may find yourself waking up more often during the night after you've had alcohol. And there is no hard and fast rule on this, but when I was researching for the podcast, I came across 3 hours as a commonly repeated guideline for when to stop drinking alcohol before bed. Okay, and as for caffeine, this is even more variable because it depends on how you respond to it. So genetics research has found that there are 10% of people in the population that has a gene that makes them less sensitive to the effects of caffeine. They are considered caffeine non-responders and may not see the alertness and awakeness impacts that caffeine responders might feel. But regardless of how you respond to caffeine, most experts recommend that you cut off your caffeine intake anywhere from 6 to 8 hours before bedtime to give yourself plenty of time for the caffeine to wash out of your system and keep you from falling asleep. So, as for naps, they are fine, but most experts recommend limiting them to 20 minutes to keep you from feeling groggy after you wake up. So there is a reason why they call it a power nap. It is short on purpose, and that's to keep you from entering too deep of a state of sleep, which will then leave you fuzzy and draggy when you wake up. So you can also try this. There are some authorities that recommend loading with caffeine, then taking a 20-ish minute nap so that by the time you wake up, the caffeine starts to kick in. It's been called a nappuccino. So if you are going to nap, keep it to the early part of your day. Late afternoon naps can interrupt your nighttime sleep quality, and they are generally not recommended. But at the same time, if you're someone who can take regular naps without it impacting your sleep schedule, then go for it. Okay? And then one other thing that comes up all the time is supplements. So melatonin is a popular one. Melatonin is a sleep hormone. It sends a message to your brain that says it's time to go to bed. You can get melatonin supplements over the counter, but be forewarned. So because melatonin is considered a supplement and not a drug, the FDA does not regulate either its quality or its dosing. So most adults can start with a low dose of 1 milligram, and it can go all the way up to 10 milligrams. But with any medication or supplement, please talk with your physician or your healthcare provider before you start it, okay? And magnesium supplementation is also getting a lot of attention as it relates to sleep because it helps regulate melatonin production. So you can often find combined magnesium and melatonin supplements. So regardless of what route you take, please check in with your healthcare provider first before you do anything with supplements, okay? And then last, exercise. So I'm not just saying this because I love to exercise, okay? I'm saying it because there is evidence to back it up. Exercise will help you get better sleep. Science doesn't even understand all of the mechanisms responsible for this, but what science does know is that exercise increases your production of melatonin, which can help you fall asleep faster and improve your overall sleep quality. We also know that moderate aerobic exercise can increase your slow wave sleep, and that is the deep sleep that you need to rejuvenate. Exercise also helps to regulate body temperature, which is necessary for falling asleep. So there are a number of ways that exercise can help you sleep, and those are just the ones we know about. And the jury is still out as to how late you can exercise before bed, but it's generally recommended to avoid serious, strenuous exercise 2 to 3 hours beforehand. But like most things, this is widely variable. So if you can go and crush your workout and then go to bed an hour later with no problem, then by all means do it. At the end of the day, the take home here is that exercise will most definitely improve your sleep. All right. And then one last thing here. I want to address this specifically because this comes up for some of you. What do you do if you have occasional overnight work? So as an example, I have a number of clients who are physicians who do overnight work. They may be emergency physicians, hospitalists, neonatologists, or obstetricians, and their work requires that they stay up all night taking care of patients. So what do you do then? Well, there are a couple of things you can do to optimize your situation to maximize sleep and minimize your post-shift fatigue. So first, you want to ensure that you're well rested going into your shift. So that means making sure that you get adequate sleep the few days leading up to when you will be up all night. So that means ideally anywhere from 7 to 9 hours a night. Then on the day of your shift, if possible, take a nap before you go in. Even just a few hours before you head into work can help mitigate fatigue and bump your alertness. Then, while you're at work, use your caffeine strategically. And if you're going to use it at the beginning of the shift so that it's not still keeping you awake when you're trying to go to bed later. Okay? Then, when you're on your way home, you want to try to minimize how much daylight you're exposed to because that has the potential to mess with your body's rhythms and it sends a message to your brain that says it's daytime and we stay awake when it's light outside. So it's suggested that you wear sunglasses to minimize the daytime light exposure to make it easier to fall asleep once you get home. And when you do get home from your shift, go to bed. Now, ideally, you want to have a chunk of 7 to 9 hours in front of you to sleep when you get home, but I get it, that is not always possible. So it may be that you sleep for a few hours as soon as you get home, followed by a longer afternoon nap of a few more hours. But ideally, you would go to bed when you get home and try to get your sleep then if you can. Same things apply here too. Make your room dark, use blackout blinds, wear a sleep mask if you need to, and use a noise machine to block out sound. If you're hungry, eat something small that has both protein and whole carbs before you go to bed. And if you want to get even more personalized input about your sleep and shift work, there's an app for that. It's called Time Shifter. It has a jet lag app, and there's also a shift work app. So the Time Shifter app takes the data that you input, like your shift start and end times and your usual sleep and wake patterns, and then it tells you what to do to minimize the impact of your shift work on your sleep. It will tell you when to sleep, when to wake up, when and how much light you should be exposing yourself to, and it's pretty cool. This will be a more personalized approach. And apparently it is the same app that NASA astronauts use to manage their sleep and wake cycles while they're orbiting in space. It's pretty cool. So check out their website. There is some pretty cool science on that page too. All right. So there it is. We just talked about all the ways that not getting enough sleep can mess with your health and fitness goals. And as you can see, there are a lot. But beyond the science and the hormones and the biology that we talked through today, more than anything, hopefully you are walking away with some ideas and things to try to start improving your sleep. And most importantly, if you are someone who, like me, used to think that sleep was for babies, I hope I've shown you a different side of it. Sleep deprivation is not a badge of honor, okay? I don't care who you are, what you do, what you're in charge of, what you own, what your title is. It really does not matter. No one is above sleep, okay? Exhaustion is no longer cool. It never was cool to begin with. But if you're part of a culture where running on empty is seen as a source of pride, I would raise an eyebrow at it. Okay? Because sleep really is essential to your wellness, no matter what your physique goals are. All right? And if you want help with this, let's go. When you coach with me, we'll talk about your habits, including sleep, nutrition, and exercise, and we'll optimize all of them. Check out my website, send me a message at www.carriehollandmd.com/contact, and let's talk about how building strong habits like sleep will help you build both a strong mind and a strong body. All right? Thank you again for hanging out with me, and I'll catch you again next week. Hey, if you're looking for your next great read, I've got you covered. Head over to carriehollandmd.com/books and download my list of most favorite reads. I've got 2 collections waiting for you. One is all about work-life balance. The other is a collection of books that have changed my life. I've referenced many of these books in the podcast, and now you can access those titles all in one place. Again, that's carriehollandmd.com/books. Check it out and find your next great read. Thank you for listening to the Strong is a Mindset podcast. If you want to learn more about how to build both a strong mind and a strong body by eating, moving, and most importantly, thinking, check out carriehollandmd.com.